You walk into a room and something shifts inside you before you even realize it's happening. Your shoulders adjust. Your voice changes pitch slightly. You scan the space for half a second longer than most people do, reading faces, noticing tone, picking up on tensions nobody else seems to register. By the time you actually say hello, you've already done 5 layers of internal calculation that the people around you never had to do. You laugh half a second after everyone else, because part of you is checking whether the laugh is appropriate before letting it out. You notice that your personality shifts depending on who you're with, and not in a small way. With one group you're quieter, with another you're sharper, with another you're warm and open, and somewhere underneath all of that, a quiet voice keeps asking which version of you is actually real. You rehearse sentences in your head before saying them out loud. You replay conversations hours after they ended, sometimes days, looking for the moment you said something slightly off. You feel a strange relief when you leave social situations, even the ones that went well, especially the ones that went well, because performing connection takes more from you than people understand. You look at groups of people who seem to belong effortlessly, who joke without filtering, who interrupt without apologizing, who take up space without flinching, and you feel like there was a manual for being human that everyone else received, and somehow you missed. You don't feel inferior exactly. You just feel like a guest in rooms where everyone else lives. And here's what nobody tells you about this feeling. People who live this way usually weren't born feeling out of place. They learned it. If anything I'm describing sounds uncomfortably familiar, take a second to subscribe before we go deeper. Because what comes next is going to explain things about yourself that you've probably never heard put into words. The strangest part of feeling out of place isn't the loneliness. It's the exhaustion. It's the mental weight of constantly monitoring yourself in environments where everyone else seems to just exist. You're never fully present because part of you is always 2 steps ahead, predicting reactions, adjusting tone, scanning for signs that you're being too much or not enough. You're performing normalcy. And the cruel thing about performing normalcy is that it looks completely invisible from the outside. People describe you as calm, quiet, independent, reserved, mature for your age, a good listener, someone who doesn't need much. They have no idea that what they're calling calm is actually a nervous system working overtime to make sure you don't accidentally become a problem in the room. You don't feel disconnected because you hate people. You feel disconnected because you've spent so much of your life trying not to bother anyone that you forgot what it feels like to simply exist around them. You don't walk into rooms to be there. You walk into rooms trying to figure out who you need to become so that the room accepts you. And the hardest part is that even when you're accepted, even when people clearly like you, the feeling doesn't go away. The compliment lands and slides off. The invitation arrives and you wonder if they really meant it. The friendship deepens and a quiet part of you waits for the moment they realize you're not who they thought you were. Acceptance from the outside cannot heal a disconnection that started somewhere on the inside. So the real question is this: why do you feel this way, even when nobody is rejecting you? Why does your body brace for exclusion in rooms that have given you no reason to brace? The answer almost always lives somewhere in the past, but not in the dramatic way people imagine. You don't need a catastrophic childhood to develop this pattern. You only needed to learn, somewhere very early, that belonging was conditional, that being loved depended on being a certain way, that your access to closeness shifted depending on whether you were easy, quiet, helpful, agreeable, impressive, or invisible at the right moment. Maybe your emotions were treated like inconveniences. Maybe you were called too sensitive. Maybe the moods around you were unpredictable, and you had to learn to read the temperature of a room before you knew how to read words. Maybe affection came when you were useful and disappeared when you weren't. Maybe nobody hurt you on purpose, but the message still landed. Who you naturally were wasn't quite the version that got rewarded. So a small, intelligent child did what small, intelligent children always do. You adapted. You watched. You learned which version of you brought connection, and which version brought distance. And slowly, without ever choosing it, your nervous system made a trade. It traded authenticity for adaptation, spontaneity for monitoring, presence for social survival. You didn't decide to become hyper-aware. Your body decided for you, because awareness was safer than openness. This is what attachment researchers like John Bowlby spent decades trying to describe. This is what Gabor Mate means when he talks about the cost of trading authenticity for attachment. This is what Brené Brown points to when she says we cannot selectively numb emotions, because the same vigilance that protects us from rejection also blocks us from belonging. You weren't born feeling out of place. Your nervous system learned that belonging depended on who you needed to be. And once a brain learns that lesson, it doesn't unlearn it just because the environment changed. You can be 30 years old, surrounded by kind people, in a life that objectively works, and your body will still walk into rooms, scanning for the smallest sign that you're about to be too much. The hypervigilance doesn't know you're safe now. It only knows it kept you safe then. This is what psychologists call social hypervigilance. Your brain treats social environments the way other brains treat physical danger. It scans constantly. It tracks micro-expressions. It notices the half-second pause before someone responds to you. It registers the energy shift when you walk into a conversation that was already happening. Most people miss these signals entirely. You absorb them like they're shouted at you. There's also something called the fawn response, which is a less talked about cousin of fight, flight, and freeze. The fawn response is what happens when your nervous system decided long ago that the safest thing to do in the face of potential rejection was to please, accommodate, soften, and adjust. People with strong fawn patterns are often described as easygoing, agreeable, generous. What's actually happening underneath is a body that learned safety came from making other people comfortable first. And then there's attachment insecurity, which doesn't mean you're broken at relationships. It means your earliest experiences of connection taught your body that closeness requires monitoring, that love requires earning, that the moment you stop performing the right version of yourself, something might be withdrawn. So, while everyone around you is just living the moment, part of your brain is busy making sure you stay accepted inside it. That's not a personality flaw. That's a nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. And here's the turn most people never hear. The feeling of not belonging doesn't come from weakness. It comes from over-adaptation. You spent so much time adjusting to environments that you lost the sensation of simply existing inside them. You became so good at fitting that you forgot what it felt like to just be. If any of this is making something click for you, drop a word in the comments. Just one word that describes how this feeling actually shows up in your life. And if this video is reaching you, a quick like helps it find other people who need to hear it too. Now I want to tell you something that almost nobody says about people who feel this way, because the world has spent too long treating sensitivity like a defect. People who have always felt out of place tend to develop something rare. You notice emotional nuance most people walk past. You can feel the temperature of a room within seconds of entering it. You pick up on what isn't being said. You can sense when someone is performing happiness versus actually feeling it. You think before you speak, not because you're slow, but because you've been burned by the cost of words that landed wrong. You read people deeply. You consider how your presence affects others. You are, often without realizing it, one of the safer people in most rooms you enter. The exact thing that hurts you, the constant attunement to others, is also the thing that makes you trustworthy in ways that loud, fast, performatively confident people rarely are. I'm not romanticizing the pain. The exhaustion is real. The loneliness is real. But your sensitivity didn't appear out of nowhere. It was built by the necessity of surviving emotionally in environments that required you to pay attention. The world rewards quickness, extroversion, and surface-level spontaneity. But you process deeply. You choose your words carefully. You observe before reacting. These are not weaknesses. These are the qualities that get called wisdom in people twice your age. You didn't learn to read environments because you were fragile. You learned because, at some point in your life, reading them was emotionally necessary. That's not a curse. That's intelligence shaped by experience. And it's worth saying clearly, the right people are not going to require you to become someone else before you're allowed to relax. The right rooms will not demand a performance at the door. But there's a wound underneath all of this that I don't want to skip over, because softening it would be dishonest. Here's the cruel irony. The thing that would actually heal you, emotional safety, real acceptance, patience, presence without judgment, is exactly the thing you got the least of in the moments that shaped you. You had to learn to read rooms because rooms weren't reading you. You had to learn to adapt because the people around you didn't always adapt to you. You became sensitive to others because someone needed to be, and nobody was being it for you. So you grew into someone who can hold space for everyone else, but rarely feels held. Someone who is easy to talk to, but hard to know. Someone whose closest relationships still have a glass wall, because part of you has never fully believed it's safe to lower the performance, even with people who have given you no reason to keep performing, and the costs are real. The quiet loneliness even in good company, the social exhaustion that no amount of sleep fixes, the sense of being somehow different in a way you can't explain, the relationships that stay slightly surface even when they should have gone deeper, the feeling that you've never quite been emotionally home. After years of trying to fit everywhere, you start to forget how to take up space without apologizing for existing. That sentence is heavy, and it should be. This pattern is not small. It shaped how you walk into rooms, how you love, how you rest, how you let yourself be seen. It deserves to be named without being rushed past. So let me leave you with this, slowly, because the rushing is part of what wore you out in the first place. The worst part of always feeling out of place isn't the loneliness. It's the tiredness of never being able to fully relax into who you are. It's the version of you that has been on duty for so long that you've forgotten there was ever an off switch. But maybe the problem was never who you are. Maybe you just spent too much time surviving in environments where you had to edit yourself to stay accepted. Maybe the disconnect you feel isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. Maybe it's a sign that some part of you is still waiting for permission to come back. Safe environments exist. Safe people exist. Real belonging doesn't ask you to perform for it. It doesn't make you audition. It doesn't reward the most polished version of you and ignore the rest. Real belonging is quieter than that. It looks like rooms where your nervous system finally stops scanning. It looks like people who don't need you to shape-shift to stay close to them. It looks like the strange, almost foreign feeling of being known without having to be impressive. You may not have found those rooms yet. You may have only had glimpses. That's okay. Glimpses are proof that they exist. One day, you're going to realize that real belonging isn't finding a place where you can adapt perfectly. It's finding a place where you finally don't have to adapt so much. If this reached something in you, leave a comment so other people who feel this way can find each other in the replies. A like helps this video reach the person who needed to hear it tonight and didn't know how to ask for it. And the video appearing on your screen right now goes deeper into the patterns we just talked about. So go watch that one next. I'll see you there.